How do you like those shots? Looks amazing, right? And it is shot on a $200 lens, Meike 35mm f2. And today we're taking a look at a Pro version, Meike 35mm f1.8 Pro. And the new lens got better in almost every way. But is it really worth almost double the price? Let's find out. What's good guys, my name is Oleg Nikitin and you're watching No Limits On channel. And you would ask, where's the second lens? And the second lens is actually filming me right now. Yes, the Meike 35mm f2 $200 lens is my main talking head lens for the last, I guess, a year. And how do you like the image quality? I think it's pretty stunning for this amount of cash. So now let's compare those two lenses. The Pro version is slightly bigger and also 100 grams more heavy. But with the lens hood attached, the size is more or less comparable. Also on the new Pro lens you'll find an aperture ring. It has clicks, but guys, keep in mind that you can easily go from auto to f16, so keep an eye on the aperture ring at all times. On both lenses you'll also find the AF/MF switch, and in the kit you'll find the back and front caps as well as the plastic lens hood, and all in all the build quality is okay. The lens is fully made out of plastic and glass. And only the lens mount is made out of metal. It also has a weather sealing gasket, a pretty thick one, and a USB Type-C port for firmware updates. Yes, both lenses are slightly bigger and heavier than the Sony 35mm FE version, but still it is pretty manageable, and I would consider the size and weight still being compact and lightweight. The front filter thread is 58mm, and I did buy a step-up ring from 58 to 67 to be able to use all of my filters. And as you saw from the examples guys, even the cheaper 35mm f2 lens can produce pretty stunning imagery. It all depends on the lighting, composition, and the thing that you're shooting. And now let's dive deeper into the image quality comparison. And the first thing that you see straight away is the difference in white balance. And the difference between those two lenses in the Kelvin values when you set up your white balance is 500 kelvins. And the Pro version is exactly the same white balance as my Sony 20-70 f4 lens. For example, if I do the custom white balance, it shows me like 5200 Kelvin with that lens, with the Sony, and the same white balance with this lens. So this lens will match your Sony glass in terms of white balance. But with the Meike f2, which I'm using right now, I have to set the white balance to about 500 kelvins lower. For example, right now I'm using 4600 Kelvin, whereas usually I do use 5100 because of my softbox is changing the color temperature just a little bit. So in terms of the sharpness, guys, you do see that the sharpness is really comparable between those two. The Pro lens is slightly better. When you stop down to f2, it's becoming even more obvious and better. Right now you're looking in the middle of the shot at 500% scale. And by f2.8 and f4 you get the maximum amount of sharpness in the middle. And now let's take a look in the corner, and it's a different story because as you can tell, the f2 version of the Meike lens is really soft and has a lot of chromatic aberrations, whereas the f1.8 version is much sharper. And when you stop down to at least f2, it's becoming even more sharp and you do lose a little bit of the vignette. And then if you stop down to f2.8 and especially f4 at 5.6, you get a really decent sharpness in the corners in the Pro lens. But the f2 lens is still having a little bit of chromatic aberrations and not as sharp corners even at f8. And one more pretty interesting observation is that the f2 version of the Meike lens is actually not 35mm but closer to 37-38mm, at least when you're not focused to infinity. So if you are focused to infinity, you do have about 35mm, but when you start focusing closer because of a very heavy focus breathing effect, you see that? The focus is kind of, not the focus, the image is kind of zooming in and out, and that is why you do have like 37-38-ish millimeters when you're focusing at about this distance, like 1.5 meters away. And the Meike 35mm f1.8 is a bit wider, about 33-34 millimeters, because I've been comparing it to my 35mm from Sony, and it has a slightly wider field of view. You have to keep that in mind. And if you look at the waveform, you can see that also the f1.8 version is a lot brighter, not like 1/3 of a stop brighter, but a lot brighter. And don't forget guys that the f-stop is a relevant number, because only if you have the t-stop like on the Cine lens, it's the exact amount of light that hits the sensor, but the f-stop is the diameter of the entrance pupil and it's a relative number. So basically in the f2 version of this lens, which is filming me right now, you have much lower amount of light hitting the sensor compared to this one. Not 1/3 of a stop, but it looks like a full stop of light of difference. Just keep that in mind, it's pretty interesting. And now we're having a look at the distortion and vignette. 35 f2 has pretty straight lines, pretty good result. And then on the Pro version, we have a very slight barrel distortion and pretty heavy vignette in the corners. When you stop down to f2 and especially to f2.8 and f4, you get rid of the vignette completely. And here is the raw image versus the JPEG image with the 35 Pro version. And as you can tell, the in-camera corrections are doing a pretty nice job in terms of vignette and distortion corrections. Now we're taking a look at the chromatic aberrations. Wide open, it's not a huge problem. When you stop down to f2.8, you get rid of the chromatic aberrations almost completely, and by f4 or 5.6 you don't see those at all. The flares performance is a bit different story because the f2 version is a super flary lens. It has a huge drop of contrast if the light hits the lens from an angle, then that is why it has a pretty deep lens hood, and you'd be better using the lens hood if you don't want those flares in your shot. The new version is a lot better in this regard, but still it's not the best performance. I would rate it like 6 out of 10, maybe 6.5 out of 10 for the new one, and like 4 out of 10 for the old one. And if you stop down to f2.8, you do get slightly better results, slightly less flares, especially from the front part, but from the sides they're still really apparent. And on the f2 lens, you do get a slight change in the white balance as well. So when the light hits the sensor from the side, the image becomes a bit more green, which is not perfect, definitely. And now let's take a look at the real-world examples with those flares, shot with the Meike 35mm f2 lens. And as you can tell, you do have an option of using those lenses as a creative choice to add a little bit of romantic atmosphere to the shot, and for the weddings it could be a nice thing, but it was a bit hard in terms of color grading because those flares do change the white balance and the contrast a lot. And as you can tell, guys, it is possible to use them in a creative way, but I do prefer to have less flares in my lenses. That is why I would prefer the Pro version of this lens for sure. But still, the images from this workshop, which is organized by my wife, by the way, is gorgeous. The models are just crazy beautiful. Now let's take a look at the autofocus performance, and the f2 version of the lens is definitely far from being perfect. The autofocus is a bit jumpy, and thanks to very heavy focus breathing effect, you do see the changing of the field of view, and it's pretty dramatic, and the lens is kind of double checking itself all the time. So on the 35mm Pro version, you do get much better results. This autofocus can be rated like 9 out of 10 definitely, because it does have pretty reliable autofocusing system. It's pretty fast and it's really accurate like this one. And when you have a look at those side by side, you can see the difference in white balance, obviously, also in the light transmission values as well. And also the autofocus performance is definitely much better on the Pro version. So cheers for Meike for upgrading the lens in this good way. And here is the focus breathing effect on the 35mm f2 lens, and it is very heavy. It's like G Master 35mm f1.4 levels of focus breathing, if you know what I'm saying. So here we have the Meike 35mm f1.8, and the focus breathing is there, but it's almost non-existent, and it's a very good result. You won't have any issues shooting video with this lens, so the focus breathing effect is not an option here. One more weak spot of the Meike 35mm f2 is the minimum focus and distance. It's only 45mm, and also the image quality wide open isn't the sharpest one, so you have to stop down to at least f2.8 or better to f4 to get the best performance. The 35 f1.8 is doing okay in terms of the minimum focus and distance. It's only 35mm, but it's like a regular amount. And here is the bokeh quality comparison. In my opinion, the f2 looks fine, but a bit busy, and the f1.8 version looks really nice and smooth. And once again, here is the difference between the f2 and f1.8, but I do see a bigger difference than 1/3 of a stop. 1/3 of a stop wouldn't give you this dramatic difference in terms of the latitude with the same settings. And then guys, in terms of the bokeh balls are really nice. And now we're stopping down from wide open to f8, and the bokeh balls do retain circular shape. Both lenses are 9-bladed aperture, and as you can tell, we have really nice bokeh quality without any major issues. And here is the bokeh quality. If you pan a little bit, you do have slight swirliness in the edges and a bit of cat's eye shapes, but I do like this actually. And here's the chroma smearing effect. They both do have the chroma smearing to about f2.8, maybe even f3.2. So those lenses are definitely not for astrophotography. And in terms of the sun stars, they are really nice. So we are stopping down from f4 to f16, and starting from f8, you do get a pretty pronounced, long, beautiful sun stars. And in terms of the prices, the f2 version is $200, as I said, and the Pro version is $380, but still it is more than 2 times less than the native Sony 35mm f1.8 lens. To conclude, guys, I do think that the new Pro version is better in each and every way than the lens that is filming me right now. It has better minimal focus and distance, better color, which is matching the Sony lenses, better light transmission to almost one full of stop, at least to my eye. It has better image quality in general, better corners, sharper corners. All in all, this lens is the best 135mm from budget lenses that I've tested on my channel, and I've tested a bunch of those, and for this amount of cash I would recommend this lens definitely, because it's actually more than 2 times cheaper than the Sony native 35 f1.8, and it has less chromatic aberrations and slightly sharper image. I'm saying it because my friend did a comparison with a native Sony 35 f1.8 and had pretty much similar results in terms of sharpness and better results in terms of chromatic aberrations with the Meike lens. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those down below in the comments, and if you did enjoy this video, smash the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notifications bell. And right here I have my full review of the Meike 35mm f2 lens, which is actually pretty good for talking head shots, as you might imagine, and it's super budget, don't forget about it. See you in that video, guys. Take care. Bye.